Hey, what's up, everybody? We're back with another edition of 95X Live, and this time we've got Arrested Youth who was kind enough to stop by and chat. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, man. Doing well. How are you?
Very, very good. We're winding summer down, and I know things are busy, so thank you very much for taking the time to sit and chat today. We genuinely appreciate it.
Of course. I appreciate you guys playing my music. So that means a lot.
Well, the new single is called Little Cup, but in a grander scale, I want to talk about Too Late to Start Over, the new album that's out streaming and available everywhere right now. I've got to say, listen, I'm a procrastinator. I will admit it. It took me up until last night to actually sit down and spend a considerable amount of time with the album. Obviously, I've been familiar with Little Cup. We've been playing it on the Fringe on 95X for about a month now to rave responses. Man, the album put my jaw on the floor, right? Like, this was just such an unexpected album, at least from my perspective, from Arrested Youth, because in the past on like nonfiction, your EP Sobville, there was a distinct slant towards a hip hop vibe.
Yeah.
It seems to no longer be there with this album. And while I adore hip hop and I adore your previous work, there's something about this album that just instantly had me connected. And so much so that I had it on in the background while my wife was doing stuff. And my wife is kind of a music snob. She rolled into the room to specifically ask what it was because I could hear her humming in the other room to it after I had passed through the album once. So,
Awesome.
my first question is this an intentional move towards a new sound, or is this just a natural evolution of who Arrested Youth is as an artist?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think I made this album over the last 2.5, 3 years. So a lot happened in my life, and to be quite honest, this album is just a really a sonic reflection of where my life took me and how I felt and the type of sentiment and sound that kind of came out of me in that process as a leftover of my experiences. So I think it's a bit of both probably. There was obviously intention for sure to evolve the sound that I had, begun making with Arrested Youth and kind of came up on. But then, of course, as well, there was very much a natural progression that led to the sound. So I would say it's 50-50 on both, actually. An intentional shift, but then also just this album sounds like how my life felt. And I think I just kind of leaned into that natural feeling of what I wanted to express as an artist, right? So I'd say this is the album that was most, for lack of a better word, most honest in my career so far, in the sense of the intention and the feel that it brings very much mirrors where I myself as a human was at over these past few years.
Absolutely. And the authenticity screams through the speakers with this album. Side one, track one, Walked Out in the Middle of the Night was what hooked me, right? Like there was an immediacy in the feeling of that song that made my brain immediately start to think like movie trailer, right? Like this has the vibe so in such a cinematic way that it just lends itself to being this anthemic monster that screams heartfelt emotion, right? Like it was an odd way to start what I thought was going to be what I had envisioned Arrested Youth would be in 2024. And it was almost like this juxtaposition of wow, right? Like did I click on the right thing? And
Right
then
artist.
as the album unfolds and you get into other songs like Silent Screaming and Free Now, it just washes over you with a sense of connection to you as an artist because even when you were doing hip hop based things, I think what I like best about what you do is the language you use, right? In a lot of ways, you speak in a language that we all speak in. And in a lot of artists' vision, they feel like it needs to be a little more flowery or they need to use bigger words or things that, I don't know, maybe don't fit as well as what really does sum up a feeling or an emotion or a moment. And I feel like that's what you've done with this album is you've captured a bunch of moments as songs and included them in sort of like a biography that you're now releasing to the world.
Yeah, well, beautifully put. Thank you, man. And I kind of maybe you should write the copy for when I fill out interviews of what the album's supposed to do, because that's exactly was my intention, and it's really nice that you see it for that. Thank you, man.
You're very welcome. I've read some previous interviews you've done, and the two things that you cite a lot as influences are Third Eye Blind, which I can hear a little bit with the new album, but the other one that's a little shocking to me is Sugar Ray.
I think those are more, maybe those were some references on the nonfiction album,
Got you.
um,
Got
in
you.
terms of
Because
sonic.
the Third Eye Blind I can hear just based in your songwriting, right? Like Stephen Jenkins
Oh
has.
yeah, I've always loved Stephen Jenkins. This album, though, I would say had much different influences than those two. I think past albums, Sugar Ray, just in terms of chord progression and also just the way they use drum machines, was always like a big inspiration point for like Nonfiction and Sobville. But this album was much more rooted in more, truly alternative and rock music, much more stripped back records and artists, much more organic, much more truly music led albums as opposed to production led albums for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the vibes I get off of this album take my brain to places like Barnes Courtney, the Lumineers, even like my friend from New Jersey, Joe P, who's making his way into the mainstream right now as well. And I've got to say, I absolutely adore the direction you're headed in. I see, listen, if my wife, who is the pickiest person in the world, can fall in love with this album after listening through it once, I can only imagine what the world at large is going to do with it.
Well, that's great. And tell your wife thank you for listening and enjoying it. It's always a question of how will the world as a bigger entity connect with the music. And I think it's early on. I'm excited to see what will happen.
Well, is honest and truthful as this album is, I think you've got a great chance of connecting to a very large, very vast audience.
Well, thank you, man. Appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Now, the album's out. I know in the past you've toured with artists like Youngblood. Is there an upcoming tour to get you out on the road playing these new songs for the fans?
Yeah, we're still in talks and kind of figuring out what the new year looks like. I kind of took it slower as an artist this year, and in the past I used to put out a record and be immediately on the road, but the way that life has taken me this time, it's a bit slower of a process. So we'll have more information about that coming at the start of the new year. So all the touring will take place in 2025.
Very cool. Now, I did make notice of something that I'll pass along here, right?
Yeah.
Just because we're a very social media based society now. You're giving updates on what you're doing with your music, specifically on your newsletter and on your Instagram. Those are the main places, and you've posted that, so I feel comfortable in saying that. But if you're looking to find out what's going on with this gentleman and the music, those are the two places. So sign up for that newsletter. Follow him on Instagram, simply Arrested Youth, and you'll get the information first. And right, like you can keep up to date. I've noticed that you do update your socials pretty regularly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very cool. Now, with a little bit of time off between now and the end of the year and the planning of a tour for 2025, I get the impression that you're a mindful musician of others, and I get a collaborative sense from a lot of your previous work. And I ask this of everybody because I always like to have my mind blown when artists collaborate. Is there anybody that you would say is like a dream collaborator, like something like Shoot the Moon for, right? Like just an artist that you would absolutely lose your mind to collaborate with, but then also take it down to earth. And is there somebody reasonable that you've had your eye on, or maybe a young artist coming up that you could see yourself working side by side with?
That's a great question. I think if we're shooting for the moon, one of my favorites of all time will forever be Brandon Flowers of The Killers. So I think, and if you listen through the record, I think there people tend to catch a few glimpses of The Killers as well on this record. So that will forever be a dream of mine. One of my favorite live shows, one of my favorite acts and songwriters. So that would definitely be shooting for the moon. Um, to be honest, off the top of my head, I can't. I in current music. I don't have an answer and I don't want to throw one out there that's kind of, half-hearted. So I'll have to sit and think on that one.
I totally understand that, my man. But I know, just based on the production value of your records and everything else, that you've got a producer's mind, and I can see the wheels turning right now as we're here on Zoom. That right, like you've probably started a mental list that you don't want to say out loud, and I appreciate that. So again, the album is out now. It's called Too Late to Start Over. The single Little Cup, in my opinion, is phenomenal. You can hear it
Yeah.
Sunday nights on the Fringe here on 95X. And congratulations, man, on it absolutely and truly, I know the word is overused, but epic release. Love the album. I'm predicting now it will certainly end up on my top 10 list at the end of the year. And
Oh,
I look
wow.
forward to hopefully getting you back out on the road and hopefully up into the Northeast and somewhere around
Absolutely.
Syracuse.
Absolutely. I'm originally from upstate New York in right outside Albany. So I appreciate you guys supporting out there.
Very cool. I appreciate it. And you can back me up on this being from that part of the state, right? Because there's like this argument that's been happening throughout the pandemic is where you're from is upstate New York. Where
Yeah.
I am is not upstate New York. Where I am is central New York.
Right.
And then there's Western New
They'll
York.
argue it for eternity, right? I think it's a gray area, but if you believe you're from upstate, I say you're from upstate.
There you go, my man. Well, I appreciate your time today, and I look forward to what the future holds for you. Congratulations on all the success you've achieved so far. I think the sky's the limit for you, sir.
Thank you so much, Scott. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for doing this.
Appreciate you. We'll talk soon.
All right, man. See ya.
Take care.